Today we learned about the amazing ability to change an entire organization or company with just one person. How's it going, everybody? Today on the show, we've got Gary De Rodriguez. He is one of my favorite people. He has an amazing story. His journey of what he's been through to get to where he is today is just incredible. I think you'll be blown away by it. And where he is today is really going in and transforming entire companies, entire organizations by helping the one or few at the top really get through some things in their life, some limitations that they just haven't been able to work through before. And by doing that openness and that transformation trickles down throughout the entire organization. It's just amazing what he can do. And I think you'll find really quickly in this interview that he's the person to do that. That's his mission in life to do this. And you'll see why really quickly when you hear his story. So let's jump in with Gary De Rodriguez. Gary De Rodriguez.
Hello, sir.
Welcome to the show.
It's very, very, I'm very honored to be here.
Well, thank you. I think it's more accurate is, what am I doing here again? I think that's the vibe going on, and that's okay.
Well, I'm in a car with a great guy, and we're going to have a conversation. That's what I know.
Well, thank you. And we are, and I'm excited about it. Ever since I heard your interview on Julian Placino's Pathways to Success podcast.
Yep.
Honestly, I was just like, I've got to know this guy. And I'm honored that you're coming on the show to tell your story. This is the guy I refer to as the real life most interesting man in the world. And you keep proving that's an accurate description. So tell me, right now, your latest endeavor here in Dallas, Texas, and I emphasize that because your journey has been quite a journey, ending up here in Dallas, Texas, is your company Peopleistic. How are you helping people right now? How are you using your superpowers with this and helping people in the world right now?
Well, I do a variety of different work with people. For me, business success is always about the human element. Projects, ideas, innovation is absolutely the foundation, but the human element is the thing that actually takes those projects to fruition from A to Z. So without a deep set base of leadership skills, without high people intelligence, which is different than emotional intelligence, influencing strategies, the ability to take diversity, create a team out of the diversity, lock them to a core of values, and inspire them to a mission. That is what makes success actually occur. Otherwise, you can't scale, you can't evolve, and always and forevermore for me, we're just not bloody smart enough, singularly, to be able to continue to create, innovate, and make shit happen unless we have great talent involved with us. And that great talent requires to be bonded to you by a sense of purpose, and I believe of social impact, which always creates much more profitability than a profit-only philosophy in organizations. So what I do is I go in and I create low attrition rates, way better culture, critical conversations, self-leadership, laterally across the boards in teams. I teach a lot about diversity, people intelligence, how to influence, how to have deep, profound respect for differences. Most importantly, how to innovate as a team and create those innovations to go through a process of at least 7 different perspectives of thinking so that you make sure that you do all your risk assessments. It's a bit like lean process mapping, but it's different. And it creates this incredible cultural empowerment through the ranks and files of the organization that is totally satisfying for me.
That's phenomenal.
So totally sad. I mean, I live for that.
And it's so interesting to me because I know that you've got the key words down to ping the radar of corporate folks and the people who need this the most, the people at the highest levels. And it's also so interesting how because you can translate, all this translates into exactly what you're talking about, low attrition rate, all the way down the line, but it is such a human development aspect that you really get into, because no matter the tech, no matter the industry or the systems and processes, like you're saying, it all comes down to human interacting with human.
Always.
And when you optimize that,
I know it's so funny to me because I'm going to tell you this story because it's a really good story. It's a metaphor. It's one of my most favorite ones. So when creation began, there were multiple gods, and the gods were all in this conversation going, how are we going to hide ourselves from man? And one god said, I know, we'll put ourselves at the very highest mountain. And they go, oh, no. Humans are too clever. They're going to find us there. Another god said, no, we'll put ourselves at the bottom of the ocean. They will never look there. And most of the gods thought that was a great idea. But they finally concluded, no, humans are so clever, they will eventually innovate ways to find us there. So one little god said, I know, we'll place ourselves inside of them. They will never look there. So what happens in most companies is that we think it's the product, the service, the idea, the new tech, the new app, whatever it is. But what people in general are looking for, and as our technology continues to evolve, this becomes even a greater wound. We're looking for connection.
Right.
We're looking for something that awakens the humanity inside of us, and we're looking for connection at the very heartbeat of things that we do. Yes, the quest for shiny objects is great in our culture.
Sure.
And the quest for personal significance is equally great. But the truth of it is, after you boil it all away, what people really want is connection.
Oh, yeah.
So within an organization, to create like a thriving culture, and I'm not just talking about the capacity to create a thriving culture within an organization. It's creating a thriving culture in your own home. When you go back from your organization, generally where I'm wildly successful, but my relationships are a train wreck. Yeah. My children hate me because I'm never there, I don't show up, I'm not present, I don't connect. So there's lots of different types of success, and one of the greatest ones is you're able to have a successful relationship. If you're able to have a successful relationship, that shows some measure of leadership, and that leadership translates so beautifully when it is, humanly based leadership, and It's more laterally evolved, and people are about wanting to actually literally be sensitive to other people's needs and desires, show humanity along the way. When they do that, they actually become inspired leaders that the best talent want to work with. And that will reflect how they live in their personal lives as well. We cannot divorce our personal lives from our professional lives. If our life is a train wreck at home, undoubtedly it's going to be somewhere along the line a train wreck within the professional realm as well. So this is about, ultimately, I like to always start at the top because the fish always rots from the head down. If the leader can actually gain enough healing within themselves to be that inspired healer that people will model and take on the culture of what's happening between the ears of the primary leader, you have incredible value. 60% of an organization's wealth or value in acquisition is really the leader, the leadership.
I believe that fully. But so then obviously that begs the next question, which is, how do you do that? How do you approach that, both in getting them to buy in and say yes, but also once you start down that road, what are you looking for first?
willingness, curiosity. I do this very unusual thing that I don't know anybody in the consulting or coaching realm is doing right now, but I do this. Like in August, I've got people flying in from Hong Kong. I've got people flying in from Australia. I've got 4 or 5 people coming from around the United States. And I do these, I call them breakthrough sessions.
Okay.
They're really breakthrough intensives. So someone gets locked into a room with me. I literally don't lock them in or chain them up. I don't do that. But
I like to pretend that you do.
Okay.
Let's say that you do.
There's lots of leather involved. But what people do is they will come in, they do lots of preparatory work before they come, and we lock ourselves down from anywhere from an 8-hour to a 12-hour period of time of me holding the pulse on what's blocking them. And we always create the breakthrough. So think about coaching from the perspective that if you only are coaching an hour a week, or maybe an hour every 2 weeks, that's your kind of coaching contract with your coach, you will get insight, there's no doubt. But then you go right back to the patterns of your old habitual way of thinking, feeling, and speaking, and working, and engaging in the relationships that you're currently in.
Right.
You start to reinforce those same old patterns of self-sabotage only after an hour, right?
Right.
So if you're only doing that, once a week or once every 2 weeks for an hour, you're never going to create that deepest insight that you must create to be able to create that emotional shift within. And that only happens by holding the pulse on the illusion so that person can eventually break through. So, I'm a master trainer of neurolinguistic programming and a master trainer of a thing called humanistic neurolinguistic psychology. That is the quick-term interventions with long-term lasting results. It's a study of how we create our subjective experience, our beliefs, our values, the core significant events that have happened that we do not have emotional resolution to. Those are all the things that create these self-sabotaging patterns if they are left unresolved.
So give me an example, if you will, obviously of because I get it, I understand a lot of this, but this is completely foreign to a lot of folks, especially business people, just business-minded. What's a real-world example of someone who's gone through this?
Yeah. Not a problem. I was working with a executive. He was VP of a international organization, and his job was to create solutions, to the historical problems. Yeah. Quite good in it, brilliant, super creative. He called me and said, "Gary, I'm having some issues with OCD." I was like, okay, so you're obsessive compulsive. Let's talk about that for a moment. This is before we booked anything.
I don't think those are issues. I think that's a positive. That's just me. Maybe because I'm OCD.
Yeah, just maybe. I don't know.
Please continue.
So his deal was that he would have these catastrophic experiences in his head around seeing horrible things happen to his child and his wife. Goodness. And he would become obsessed with them to the point that he would physically become quite compromised. He would roll up in a knot in his stomach. He couldn't function. It was very obsessive because the visuals were so intense for him.
And he just got locked in a loop and
couldn't get out of it. That was a relatively short session. That was probably maybe 2 hours. And what was revealed out of that, because if you can get to the root cause, you can begin to create dramatic shifts in a person's behavior. Yeah. So the root cause was that as we pulled back the layers and we did a little bit let's trace this back in time, where it went back to was when he was a small boy, his parents were not getting along, and his mother would walk out the door and say, "I'm never coming home." And what he would do is he would follow his mother down the street, hiding behind cars, hiding behind trees, making sure she was okay. Now, how that same pattern was manifesting as an adult at 46 years old was when his wife left the house with the child to drop the child off at the in-laws so that she would go to work. She would have to text him at every stop she made.
Oh my goodness.
To make sure that he could make sure that she was okay. And he would just become obsessive if she was 10 or 15 minutes late from a time that she should have been somewhere but wasn't.
Yeah.
And it was I won't say it was wrecking the relationship, but it was causing a deep need for patience.
That's a very nice way.
Yeah, nice way of putting it. Another example was I was working with senior staff attorney for a large Japanese car manufacturer. So you can imagine which ones those are. And he would freeze when he had to go to a meeting in Japan. He would become very smart, very brilliant attorney. But when he walked into the Japanese offices and was in meetings with the heads of the company, he would freeze almost to the point where he couldn't even speak.
Wow.
Which didn't make him look so great.
Right.
And what that all boiled down to was years of shaming from a critical father, anyone in an authority figure. He would naturally revert back to someone much younger than what he was emotionally, to where he actually was being triggered by the authority figures in the Japanese offices that related right back to the shaming and the experiences he had as a child with his critical father.
So when you discover that, is that enough? The discovering the link?
No, there is a whole variety of neutralizing the emotional states from the past, shifting limiting beliefs, aligning values, deepening and broadening your sense of purpose and identity. Because a lot of people get stuck by trauma in time, and they will emotionally act out those emotional states based upon where they're stuck in time from the trauma. So all this kind of happens to all of us. We've all had some level of, gee, I wish that wouldn't have happened to me, right? But it did. And if we don't get that resolved emotionally, feelings buried alive, they don't die. What they do is they mutate. So this is how it becomes quite corporately appropriate, because there's a lot of hard hitters out there that are real good, they're real good bowlers. They get out there and they make stuff happen. And you have to start looking at, could they be doing far more, not only in their professional life, but their personal life, if they didn't have these unresolved emotional inhibitors trailing behind them? So my job is to go in there and help people uncover that in a way only when that stuff is blocking them by behaviors that they don't understand why they do what they do. There's a lot of executives and a lot of people at a high level that are suffering from addictions, either alcohol, drugs, sex, shopping, all that happens. And it's about helping people actually get to that balance in life. So, yeah, for me, it's about helping people do that.
So how do you know? So what are some of the signs, I guess, for someone that maybe they don't have that tangible, I'm trying to fix this thing, like the lawyer going into the room?
Fear is also always a good indicator.
Okay.
Anger and quick to anger is also a good indicator. Relationships that become extraordinarily difficult for people because they're getting triggered off to a degree that they know that they're over responding, but they can't control the response. Those are always good indicators that it is not about that set of circumstances in that moment. It's about what that set of circumstances is triggering off in their emotional body.
Gotcha. That makes sense. And now, you certainly didn't wake up one day when you were a small boy and know all of this.
That's exactly how it happened. Just one day, bam, I just knew this stuff.
All right, interview's over. My mistake. What was life like for you before this core understanding in life? Did you have things showing up in your own life that you wanted to resolve?
That would be a big hairy yes.
Okay.
So I'm this firm believer that life shows up in the most magical ways, and our greatest pain is always creates the cocoon for our greatest wisdom.
Interesting.
So I came from a very colorful background, which was, a gift. But from about diapers till I was about 11, I was molested by a primary caregiver. I was, I saw a lot of, trauma in my family. Like there was child molestation, there was, drug addiction, there was alcoholism, there was attempted murder, there was lots of attempts at suicide, always very messy. And so I had PTSD a lot as a kid. So I had a lot of learning disabilities as a child. And that was quite difficult, going through life with those because there was a lot of shame. I also have an Hispanic last name. And as we spoke, I just, found out like 5 months ago that my father raised me is Hispanic, is not my biological dad. So that was a big surprise. But growing up in an all-white school district in Southern California, which is San Diego, which is a border town, I dealt with a lot of racism, quite frankly. And so there's a lot of shame, my learning disabilities, a trauma that I couldn't speak about, and then being Hispanic and people telling me I only could walk in the gutters because I was a wetback, and and there was just all this like hatred directed to us just because of my last name. It was very interesting. And at about 13, I became a drug addict because you're carrying all this stuff with you, these feelings you can't resolve, and these situations that you can't escape. And so I began utilizing methamphetamine and heroin, and I was an IV drug addict from about 13 till about 18, wow. 17 and a half, something like that. It was very colorful because in those days, the only way I knew how to make money is I as soon as I graduated from high school, I moved to Hollywood. And the only job I could find was being like this child porn star. So there I was this raging IV drug addict. I was making money by doing what porn stars do. And I was completely lost. I deeply desired to commit suicide, of course, didn't. And I just called up my dad one day and I said, I am going to die unless you come and get me and help me. And he did.
Wow.
Out of all the torture I put him through, he drove up to Hollywood, put me in the car, drove me back down to San Diego, gave me a car, gave me a little place to live. And he said, under one condition, you go to college. So I started. I was agoraphobic at that time because I couldn't leave the house. People terrified me. And I had a spiritual experience. I was dating this girl, and no one's going to remember this, so I'm going to totally date myself here. But there was a folk singer named Donovan, and I went to one of his concerts. It was my girlfriend and my favorite, person. And so we go to this conference, a concert, and it was the Mariachi days, when the Beatles were like all long hair, and they were like not smoking pot anymore. They were, well, maybe they were, but they weren't doing heavy drugs. They were just kind of, meditating a lot. So I went straight that night, and I decided I wasn't gonna do drugs. And I was sitting in the front row, and Donovan came out and the concert hadn't started. He was just tuning up his sitar. Had to be a sitar, right? Dressed in white linen, sea of flowers sitar. So he just looked at me and pointed to me and said, "You are wasting time." And this light bulb went off in my head. It's almost like every cell of my body knew exactly what he meant.
Wow.
There
was no, what, me? What? There was
no, there was none of that. It was just like, I don't even know if anybody heard it, but it changed my life. In that moment, it changed my life. I went home after the concert. I broke all my needles, flushed about $80,000 worth of drugs down the toilet, quit smoking 3 packs of Marlboro Longs that night, and changed my life.
That's incredible.
And from there, I started this deep, profound seeking. And I was seeking a spiritual path that made sense to me, and none of the Western religions made any sense to me. I eventually read this book called The Path of the Masters, and it was a very obscure form of yoga. The master lived in northern India in the Punjab, and as soon as I read the first 5 pages of the book, I said, this is it.
Really?
And I've been following that meditational path since I was 17. Still am.
Wow.
And so I meditate a bit and hang out in that, in that headspace.
Mm-hmm.
But that moment really shifted my life.
Oh, yeah.
And from there, I went off and I studied with different indigenous elders around the world. I worked with, I was sweat lodge keeper for a Rikra medicine woman for 10 years. I worked with kahunas on the Big Island of Hawaii, studied with some of the shamans down in Machu Picchu in Peru, and worked with the Aboriginal law keeper for all the tribes of Western Australia. All of which was looking for that golden thread that bound human consciousness and the human condition. And I found some great insights and some miraculous people along that journey, of which continue to deepen anything that I'd learned up to that point in time.
Was there what kept you going forward, I guess, and still searching? Did you have an idea that there's a one thing out there, or did each step just kind of layer on itself?
I had an idea that there's one thing that binds us all, and that is that need for connection. We can call it connection to one another. We can call it spiritual connection. We can call it connection to our purpose, or connection to our legacy, however we want to frame it. I have my own particular personal frame that I put around that, but it is whatever people want to make up about that, but it is about connection. So, yeah, I mean, there is this thread that binds us all. And personally, I think for people to wake up to whatever that is for them individually, that is what makes up a completed tapestry of humanity, because each one of us is a thread in that tapestry. And when we start to wake up individually, we actually contribute to the beauty of the overall tapestry.
Oh, yeah.
And my sense is that it's our deepest individual responsibility to wake up to the best expression, the most powerful force for good that we can be, and be that as fully as we can be that, as consistently as we can be that. Because I have this idea that human beings are absolutely intrinsically good. We're like a glass of milk. That inherent in milk is cream, right? So if the milk becomes still long enough, the cream naturally rises to the surface. The richness of that glass of milk becomes evident. And if human beings still their story of what did and didn't happen to them, the deep requirement to blame, the propensity to be a victim, and to hold resentment, all of those things, if those stories start to become still, like the love we are, naturally rises to the surface. So I was doing a talk at an organization called the American Chamber of Commerce. It's the biggest one in Australia, biggest chamber of commerce in Australia.
Okay.
So Shell Oil sent a bunch of their representatives because I was speaking on leadership. So they had a whole table of like 10 executives from Shell Oil there. They approached me later to come and speak at their leadership conference. After I moved back to the United States, they emailed and said, would you come and speak at our conference on leadership? So I said, sure. So I flew back down, and this is the example of what I experienced as an awakened leader. So I'm hanging out outside the training room because the whole group is in there. There's about 100 people, and these people are running projects that are billions of dollars, right?
Right.
They have a vocabulary utilizing words I've never even heard. They're super academic, incredible people. And I'm hanging out outside, and I'm just kind of reviewing some notes. And this guy comes out on his cell phone and goes, "Oh, you're Gary Rodriguez." I said, "Yeah." And he goes, "Why don't you come in?" I don't know who the guy is. I'm waiting for my point person to bring me in, right? And he goes, "Oh, no, come on in. I'll set you up here. You're gonna be fine." I said, "No, I really feel more comfortable waiting for the point person." He goes, no, it's gonna be fine. Come on in." So I went in, I sit down, and he's very gracious to me. He's very kind, and he walks off. And I'm like, okay, well, sit and hang out and listen to the presenter that is before me. And then that presenter gets off. Everybody has a little break. We sit back down, and this guy that came out and got me gets up on stage, and he happens to be the CEO of Shell Oil Australia. And when he got up, he hadn't said a word yet. He got up, there was an audible hush of awe in the room. Audible. People just went, "Ah." Oh, shit. Then he began to speak. The humility, the transparency, the deep, profound caring for everyone in that room was palatable.
Wow.
And I was
So it wasn't a gasp of like, "Oh no, here's the guy."
It was a gasp of respect and love, I'll say. This guy was so deeply loved by his executive teams that I thought, okay, whatever he's doing and whoever he is being is one of the rare examples of inspiring leadership that I have seen.
Wow.
And so then I got up to present and did my talk, did my presentation. Afterwards, he got up on stage as I was finishing up, and he walked up to me and he hugged me, like CEOs of global companies like Shell don't do that.
Right.
He got up and hugged me and said, "You presented the missing piece to every leadership training we've ever done at Shell Oil."
Really?
And then he invited me to dinner with all of the executives for Shell Oil, which I gratefully accepted.
Yes.
And I will say that moment where I observed what a impassioned, inspiring, congruent, consistently behaving leader can bring forward out of people was a testament to everything that I had ever believed about leadership being demonstrated flawlessly by him.
That's incredible.
So when people ask me, well, how does this deep work actually happen? Peter Drucker, or why should it happen? Peter Drucker, the world's most respected business guru, has said that leadership's definition is really consistent, congruent leadership, not as a rank, but as a service. And the only way that people who are really committed to their success can actually step into that role is that if they don't have profound mental emotional management skills driven by a highly committed to purposeful life, they will not be able to be consistent and congruent, and they will not be able to inspire the trust that's going to be needed for the long haul to be able to keep the type of talent that they will need to drive the projects and the innovation forward, to keep the cutting edge above and beyond their competition.
Oh yeah. And we've all seen that.
Yeah, so the deeper work, this is why I told that story about everyone's looking outside of themselves. Every leader always looks outside themselves for that. What's the next magic pill? What's the next magic bullet, right?
Right.
When in fact, oftentimes it is who they need to be to inspire that best behavior in their teams so that they start to actually build that level of loyalty, credibility, and performance. Because people are inspired by the mission, they're inspired by the purpose, and they will model the leader.
Oh, without a doubt.
So, when I always find it fascinating that people, it just sounds like too airy-fairy for me. I'm not going to look too deep in myself. That is where you're going to get your leadership truly mastered.
Oh, yeah.
And nowhere else you're going to get it.
And that's what I think is so it's so amazing about what you do, because I believe wholeheartedly in your approach and the results and the reasons why. But for you to be able to translate all of that to corporate speak, to corporate world, and navigate those waters that are traditionally the complete opposite of what you do, I think is absolutely amazing. And I mean, what's the key to that? How do you, is it showing them results?
It's that, but I am so committed to waking people up out of the matrix of their dream of fear, questing for shiny objects, and personal significance, because always and forevermore, at the end of the day, we're all going to die. And at the end of this road, whatever this road is going to be for us, not him, he's immortal. But at the end of this road, what it's all going to be for us is that we're going to look back over our lives, and we're going to say, I either did it or I didn't do it. And there's not one cell in our body that's not going to know whether we did it or we didn't do it.
Right.
I think one of the reasons I'm so passionate about this, because my whole career got launched in the AIDS community. When AIDS first burst out onto the scene, I jumped into the trenches. I ran the first AIDS educational seminar in Southern California. I was part of a team of 5 people that developed the AIDS Holistic Response Program that turned into a federally funded program across the U.S.
Oh, wow.
I sat at the bedsides of more people that have died than I care to count. In those days, you were diagnosed, and 3 months later, you were a skeleton and you were dead. So my whole deal was, how do I get people to resolution quickly? Because they only have 3 months to do it.
Yeah.
Right? That's why I started studying all these accelerated programs of personal change, because I didn't have the time to wait for people to go through 5 years of psychotherapy.
Right. But you still saw the value. In resolving that, even if they were 3 months to live.
Yeah. And the most important thing for me was that I got to see really successful deaths, and I got to see really horrific ones. And what I always saw in the successful deaths were people who had resolution with their relationships, had peace in their relationships, people who felt like whatever their soul came here to do, they were complete, and they'd done it. And the unsuccessful deaths were those people who could not let go of their bitterness, their guilt, their shame, and knew that they lived their life chasing things that were not aligned to their essence, their core, their mission, their purpose, and they died unfulfilled, clawing at the sheets of their bed to stay in their bodies. So when I look at people that are not on the verge of death, which is a really good thing to do, I know that no matter how wealthy we are, how successful we are, there will come that point where the accumulation of our lives is built one action, one relationship at a time. Yeah. So at the culmination of our lives, it is a collection of all the ways we've treated people, how we've treated ourselves, the way we've touched others, the good we've done or the lack of good that we've done. It all accumulates at that point. And either we've done it or we haven't. So my whole point is inspire people to wake up so that at the end of their journey, they are able to actually bless this life and move on to whatever comes next for them.
And how much of striving for that is figuring out what it is, what that thing or process or person
Okay, now
is.
you're going to drive out all this stuff from my meditation that you're just going to make me talk about, aren't you?
Yes.
Okay. So, every world religion says that man and woman are made in the image and likeness of God. Every one of them say that. Now, they can't agree on what new or old ritual they need to do to make them more holier than the other. But one thing they all agree on is that. Now, if that's true, that man and woman are made in the image and likeness of this thing called God, I don't think that the true temple is anywhere ever in a brick and mortar structure. It's not listening to someone interpret sacred writings. It is in the temple of our relationships that we create heaven or we create hell. The more that we extend compassion, the more we extend understanding, the more we extend the capability of not creating endless condemnation of others.
Or ourselves.
The more we can do that, the more we still are milk. The more we're able to actually rise up above the endless thought forms that are being projected on everyone. And we become more, I don't want to say spiritual, but I do believe that we tap into that sacred core that is us.
Yeah.
The less we condemn, the less guilt we have, the less fear we have, because if we're condemning, we're actually fearing being attacked as well. So it begins first with us. It doesn't happen to us, it happens from us. So the more generosity, the more kindness, the more gifting of non-judgment we can give to others, the more peace we begin to find. I love that one statement that the Dalai Lama said. Someone asked him, "What is your religion?" And he said, "My religion is kindness."
It's beautiful.
And, quite frankly, if we were not acting out of fear, if we were not acting out of our own self-regret and shame and guilt, if we were constantly attempting to do the right thing by others with appropriate boundaries, of course, we would feel another whole level of peace, tranquility, and commitment. I mean, I've seen more suffering in my life than a lot of people have. And that for me has grown a certain level of compassion, not to the detriment of myself, but a certain level of compassion. And I am completely committed to ending the suffering that's happening in organizations across the boards and ending the suffering that individuals do. My opinion is that if it knocks on my door, it's mine. So when clients come, it's like, I'm 150% committed to this. When a company calls me and says, "I think we need you in-house for a while," I'm 150% commit. I will become the company because I get totally committed to that organization when I'm involved with that organization. I think it's vital that people care for one another, that people do the right thing by one another, that people stop condemning the differences and they start embracing the differences as just another manifestation of something that's animating them. It's the same animating principle. And so I'm all over that to inspire that type of treatment. And that may be, at a very fundamental level, if I'm an atheist, it's like, I'm just going to be the best expression of me I can be till I turn to worm food. Well, why not be a powerful force for good while I got this body to do it? So I'll feel good about myself being organic matter for the next tree or plant or whatever. I'm totally honorable. If you're an evangelical Christian, then bloody hell, be more like Christ.
Yeah.
If I'm a Buddhist, I'm going to still my mind. I'm going to go inside. I'm going to reach peace, and I'm going to stop the condemnation of others. If I'm a Muslim, I'm going to embrace the same principles that grows love and compassion for others as well. The bottom line is, it's throughout every world religion. And I think the thing that got me so impassioned is every single indigenous elder I studied with, it was always the same message. Across continents, it was always the same message.
You could feel that truth.
Yeah, it's got to be the truth.
Yeah.
So when I am with people, I try my very best. Let's cancel that word, try. I do my very best to be that. And I'm not always successful, trust me. But I do my very best. It's not a destination. I decided it's a journey. So
well, and it's incredible too, because you've seen the power of affecting that one person, especially how you go in and affect organizations. And like you mentioned, you start at the very top. When you affect that CEO, that affects hundreds to thousands of people that he is going to touch, and the people that he touches are going to touch.
Or she touches.
She, absolutely. And it spreads forever and spreads to the home life. So that change you can make in the one person in the small group in an organization can just have trickling effects.
Right. Well, that's
for years.
exactly why I chose over time to focus on the C-suite, because I know that in my life, I probably have another 10 years of 14-hour days. And then I'm getting tattooed, I'm moving to Maui, I'm going to get pierced, I'm just going to lay on the beach and meditate. That's what I'm going to do. Watch a lot of sunsets, it'll be great. But what I know for right now is that the more people that I can influence that are influencers, the bigger impact I can have. And that is my entire commitment right now, is to create the greatest impact I can create with the time I have. And it's important. And when people at a high level can make that kind of shift and change, they create loyalty and commitment from the best talent that they can attract, which affects their succession planning. It affects the culture. It affects the performance. And I think really importantly, it affects the lives of countless people, and not only their lives that are employees, but the employees' children and their marriages and generations it can affect. So we're not talking about a small change here. I'm uncertain whether leaders actually really understand the ecology of what and who they affect by their humanity or their lack of it.
Yeah, and when you find someone who gets it and they go through what they go through with you and come out the other side,
it's bliss for me.
Oh, and for them, and they are going to sing it from the rafters, and they are going to implement the things in their organization to make sure that as many people as possible feel what they have. So it's the sheer net result of doing what you do leads to that kind of response anyway. So it just perpetuates.
Well, let me just talk about this one thing, because this is one of the biggest things I take into organizations. Is I train those 3 core competencies laterally, lateral throughout the organization. I went into a school district and trained these 3 core competencies from the board of trustees to the superintendent's office down to the principals to their leadership staff. Then their leadership staff, the next group I tackled was 9th, 10th, and 11th graders. The whole entire school district had the exact same competencies.
Oh, wow.
It was mind-blowingly incredible. The deal is, when we train absolute, complete responsibility to take ultimate accountability for the results that each one of us get. That's number 1. Number 2, you can only do that if you have self-leadership, mental, emotional management skills. So I train a whole variety of mental, emotional management skills to get people to be 100% accountable to the results that they're getting. So the blame ends, the backbiting ends, and people are actually able to go, now what part did I play in this, and how can I co-create this differently?
Right.
Second step is people intelligence, understanding, second competency, people intelligence, understanding the diversity of others. Stop hallucinating, stop projecting, stop transferencing, and take a strategic way of how you get from differences and build a bridge to the middle. Super important.
Yes.
The last one is how to solve problems, how to think from 7 different perspectives so that you can solve the problems, and how to innovate like Thomas Edison. You train teams in those 3 core competencies, you have high performance across the board. The culture naturally improves. People take that information home. I've had companies actually bring in families, like the employee's husband or wife, to learn those same core competencies, so those same core competencies actually are translated into the home. Beautiful. It ends up being this ecological tidal wave through the company that people actually get, wow, I can actually be happier. I can actually do this. And
then the result of all that as well comes down to
performance and profit, ultimately.
Yeah, so even for the hardcore data, I need results kind of people, it still makes sense.
Well, our company was published by Bloomsbury Publishing House on conscious capitalism. We wrote a book called Humanistic Business, Profit People with Passion and Purpose. And in that book, out of the research that we did, and this is like ridiculous profit margins, they took a group of companies operating, empowering their internal stakeholders, their staff, doing socially impactful things in their communities. Those companies, over a 10-year period of time, made over 900% greater profit than the performance of the great companies who were already making 3 times greater profit than regularly run organizations.
Right.
So the economic benefit of doing what I am talking about is ridiculous.
Wow.
It's ridiculous. And still, people will think it's the next app. It's the next widget that I need to create. It's the next, push or acquisition that I need to make.
Right.
It is about, and I'll say this to all leaders, it's about you first. It's about you first.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Well, I really appreciate you sharing all of this wisdom and your past and your insights and in how you help so many people right now. I really appreciate that. How can people find you, get a hold of you, stalk you on the internet, all of that?
Okay, well, you can look me up on LinkedIn. It's Gary Day Rodriguez. You can call me, 972-998-0928. I will have a conversation with you. You can email me, Gary at Peopleistic, Peopleistic.com. And I will get back to you and love to have the conversation. The bottom line for me is the more we're able to wake ourselves up out of this matrix, the better impact we're going to have, the more people we're going to touch, the more still our milk's going to become, the more peace we're going to have. And cumulatively, my invitation is we all dance out of our bodies looking back on this planet going, we did a great job. So that's what I'm thinking.
I love it. So appreciative of Gary being on the show. It's just amazing to hear his story and his insights into us, right? Into our human selves. The insights that he has and what he brings to entire companies and to bring his message of humanness to corporations. It's such an amazing ability. I'm so impressed with him. So definitely reach out. I'll have all the links and all that good stuff in the show notes at thejasonscroft/Gary, Gary. And you can link up with him there and kind of, like we say, stalk him on the internet. So if you do see some value out of this interview and what Gary can come in and do for your organization, do reach out to him. And if you like interviews like this, make sure you subscribe right here on YouTube. And if you're listening on the podcast, head on over to iTunes and subscribe there. Make sure you get all these great interviews with just amazing people like Gary. Thanks so much. We'll see you next time.
It's Saturday night. It was Saturday night and I'm feeling kinda silly. Winter coat on cause the air was chilly, but I'ma make my way out to the record spot. Gotta find some new breaks for the beats to rock. I gotta come with the flavor like some lifesavers. On now and later's Dr. Beatmaker. If I'm a player, it's like your tape deck. And if you miss the gig, then take a rain check. Stacks of wax piled high to the ceiling. Need a U-Haul truck if I would think about stealing, but it's not my steed, so I commence with the digging, no kidding. Something that'll keep the beats hitting what I'm getting. So much to choose from, bro.